today is from a book of true stories entitled 10 Amazing Muslims Touched by God by Faisal Malik. I hope I'm saying his name correctly, but I highly recommend reading this book as you'll be fascinated with these uniquely different testimonies from 10 different Muslims. As the author explains in the introduction of the book, the stories he shares in this book are often from very special Muslims, some Sunni, some Shiite, to whom God chose to reveal himself in extraordinary supernatural ways. The men and women in these chapters represent a vast demographic of Muslims, from jihadists to peaceable leaders to intellectuals of various echelons of society from around the world. Most of them are devout, while others are scholars of the Quran and Hadith, and some are just ordinary Muslims in search of answers from God. All were committed followers of Allah and Islam with a deep affinity for truth in their hearts. Each of their stories and perspectives about Islam are very transparent and unique. The one I'd like to highlight and share with you today is by Kamal Saleem, who was born into a large Sunni Muslim family in the heart of the Middle East and recruited at an early age by the Muslim Brotherhood as an Islamic Jihadist. He titles his story From Jihad to Freedom. Kamal Saleem writes, "I had a dream as a child. I was dressed in the long white shorts that Muslim children wear and was riding a white horse. In each arm, I held a double-edged sword. In front of me stood the enemies of Allah. They were Jews and Christians. I cried out, 'For Islam!' and ran into the battlefield. Their elite warriors came at me and I challenged them, causing chaos among them. I conquered them and took off their heads with the sword so that their heads were rolling under the feet of Allah. In my dream," he writes, "I was martyred, and when I came before the throne of Allah, he was laughing and said, 'Only my crazy Kamal could do something like this.' This was my Islamic worldview from childhood," he writes. "The dream reflected the Sunni beliefs of my family," he said. He said, "Jihad for me was birthed from infancy. Our home was in Lebanon. To me it was beautiful and heavenly. My father was my hero as a child. I looked forward to seeing him when he came home, usually with 2 leather bags with food. I could smell the metal on his body as he was a blacksmith. He understood steel and he understood hard work. My mother came from an Ottoman Turkish background and believed with all her heart that the ultimate Ottoman Empire will rise again to rule and reign. Our home was a 3-room house where I lived with my 13 brothers and sisters. It was like a bunker at night, one side for the boys and the other side for girls. It was tragic, but only 11 of us lived past our childhood. If my mother or sisters did something wrong, my dad would do something harsh to them. In Islam, he said the men were often in charge of the women, and the women answered to the men, so that's how it was in his family." He writes, "My favorite place was the kitchen. It was where I learned things about Islam from my mother. She taught us what it meant to be a Muslim and how Muslims had conquered the world and would do it again. She taught us the Quran and the Hadith, which is a collection of writings of the eyewitness accounts of the deeds and sayings of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. She was a very passionate teacher," he writes. "Even other women came to listen to her teach. My siblings and I were taught to recite the Quran with our mom as she chanted. She made sure that we understood that whatever we do in our lives, small or great, we would reap after death. My father would explain it this way: Allah will weigh all your deeds, both good and bad, and whatever tips the scale means heaven or hell for you. I knew as a young child that my life must be about working my way to heaven. In Islam," he said, "our works and deeds are the only chance to enter heaven other than martyrdom." Around that kitchen table, I learned from my mother that the day of Muslims would not come about unless we fight according to the Hadith, or Hadith, that book of the deeds and sayings of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. I understood from my mother about the conquering Islamic war. She said, "If you kill a Jew, your hand will light up before Allah, and the host of heaven will celebrate your killing." He goes on to say, "We kids practiced killing on the cats and dogs in the neighborhood. I learned what my fate would be. Not only must I work for my future, I must meditate each night on how to conquer the world and how to bring Islam to the world. I loved Islam and Allah and Muhammad," he said, "and all he said in the Hadith with all my heart. I learned from childhood that I was going to change the world. I was willing to die for Islam. Even my mom said so. I believed all along, just as the 9/11 attackers did years later, that I could do bad things, and then if necessary, I could just die as a martyr and still have a one-way ticket to heaven. My father taught about martyrdom. He taught that every Muslim will have to pass through hell first, according to the Quran in Surah 1971. When a martyr dies, the first thing that happens is he becomes an intercessor. Because of his martyr's death, his family can go to heaven without being judged. So families rejoice when a son becomes a martyr. He was taught that a martyr also receives 72 virgins at his death. He said to my dad, "You only have mom and you have issues with her. How are you going to have 72? How am I going to do this?" He said the grace of Allah would be sufficient. He said they interpreted the Quran as Muslim zealots. Moderates were seen as infidels who must be Islamicized. He learned as a child not to be afraid to lie about things. He said we were taught that it's okay to lie, not against a Muslim, but against any enemy of Islam. If we were asked to spy on the enemy, we were to lie about them. Whatever one says for the sake of Allah and for Islam is forgiven. This is a doctrine called al-taqiyya, and I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly. He said, I was taught that one of the 99 names of Allah is the Great Deceiver. In the Hadith, Muhammad said specifically that if a Muslim ever takes an oath and finds it's more beneficial later to do something against the oath, he can then do the better thing. Muslims can do anything for the sake of Islam. Small sins or big sins, it doesn't matter, he writes. At the age of 5, he said, I was going to the mosque and fasting at Ramadan with my mother's help. I was learning in the mosque how to conquer the infidels. We were to conquer the world, specifically the United States and Israel, he writes. America is considered the throne of Satan, where he resides, while Israel is the second Satan. We were taught that they must be destroyed. America is the final frontier. If we conquered America, we could conquer the whole world. These were the principles I was learning as a child. When I was 7 years old, my father took me out of school to bring in finances. I was forced to work for my uncle, who lived on the other side of town. I worked all week for $3. My uncle would beat me if I was late. If he could not get out of me what he wanted, he would slap my face. I had to walk there, which required that I walk 3 areas: the Armenian Christian, Kurdish, and Shiite neighborhoods. I woke up late one day at 5:30 a.m. On the way, I was beat up by some mean teenagers. They stole my shoes, my umbrella, and my lunch. My cheek was cut, and I couldn't see out of one eye. I was bleeding everywhere. I took refuge in a mosque. The imams saved my life that day. So from that day on, my life was different. These imams were holy men, and what they taught me as a child shaped my life. Islam means submission. The translation in Arabic means you're not just a servant, but one who seeks to please. The teaching of this submission to Allah is that we have the right to take over the whole world as Muslims. We have to usher in war in order to bring Islam to the world. We have to fight for the land of Israel and go to America because their women, their children, and even their economy legally belong to us. One day a man came to our mosque and talked to us about the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is made up of people trying to spread Islam through war. He said, you have the power of the Quran. Now you can have the power of the sword. The Muslim Brotherhood is one of the most radical organizations in the world. Al-Qaeda finds its roots in this organization, and many other radical groups do as well. This recruiter was a representative of the early Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, which was called Fatah at that time, F-A-T-A-H. Our whole group joined, and I was the youngest. I went to my first PLO assault camp at the age of 7. The first day I went to the camp, I was completely taken with it. I saw the biggest playground I ever saw, dangling ropes over mud holes to jump over, flat walls to jump and climb over. I had no toys, and now these were the biggest toys imaginable, but they weren't for playing. We were to approach these things as warriors. These men lived war. They smell like warriors, and they look like warriors with their long hair. This was not a class trip. We were here to learn war. My life took a turn that day. One of the leaders looked at me and he said, "Child, do you want to be a warrior?" I said, "I am a warrior," and I slapped my chest or my hand on my chest. He said, "You cannot be unless you know how to use a weapon." So he took up an AK-47. He chunked it and he handed it to me. The smell of the steel reminded me of my father's shop, bold and strong. I was familiar with that smell. It entered me. He taught me how to hold it. I learned how to go from one shot to automatic. "Now shoot," he said. I shot 30 bullets into the heavens that day with an AK-47 and fell in love with a rifle. I knew at that moment I was transformed. I loved the feel of the steel in my hands. The gun became my friend, and the smell of gunpowder became my addiction. It robbed me of my soul. Now I had the word, Islam and the Quran, and the sword, the AK-47. I wanted to be that warrior for Allah and live like these men and one day fulfill my childhood dream. Not only could I now handle a machine gun, but I learned how to make bombs and how to slip into enemy territory to use the gun and the bombs. We trained on and on for weeks. Besides knowing how to shoot howitzers and automatic weapons and use TNT blocks, we were taught how to slit throats, how to pierce a man's liver and kill him in 5 seconds, and how to drown someone underwater. One day, he writes, we were practicing going under barbed wire in preparation for going into Israel, while a .50 caliber gun was shooting over us with live ammunition. One of my friends peeked over the barbed wire just to see. His head is still there. He was killed instantly. I didn't realize until that moment how real this all was. What happens to the mind of children who are exposed to that dehumanization? The breaking of our spirits came at a young age when our moms and dads taught us this was the path. The imams taught us hate and anger with the intent to take over the world for Islam. Then they would send us into killing fields to desensitize us to murder. We were programmed to believe that this was how we were to live our lives. We were completely broken, like a horse that now accepts the rider and obeys the bit in his mouth, or like a dog that was trained so he knows all the tricks. Now at 7 years old, I was a liberator, determined to liberate everyone to whom I was sent. I was sure I would change the world. I started recruiting other children who wanted to be like me. My first mission at that young age was to smuggle duffel bags with TNT blocks and AK-47 ammo into the Golan Heights in Israel through Syria via underground tunnels. These tunnels are like the ones dug between Gaza and Israel, or the ones dug from Mexico to the United States. We would rendezvous with some shepherds at our drop point, and then they carried the ammunition and explosives to the Fidiyim, the Arab commandos, to kill the Jews. My first mission was a success, and when we got back to our base, hundreds of men and women celebrated us by shouting victory and Allah is great. Now I really thought I was going to change the world. I was given my next mission to the Golan Heights, but this time I was to lead the group of young warriors. As we grew closer to our drop point, something did not feel like the first mission. The yoke seemed heavier and I was so scared. I wondered if Allah was watching me. I told myself I could not be weak. I must set an example for the younger ones. So as we approached the other side, we heard a swarm of flies. We kept moving forward toward the rendezvous point, and there was no sign of the shepherds, and all the sheep were lying down. Then we saw the color scarlet and realized that blood was everywhere. We were about to abort the mission when suddenly a rocket fell, and all these bullets just started coming at us from the Israelis. Everything slowed down for me as if time was stopping. I was crying out, "Mama!" And I heard other kids crying for their mothers too. One of them got shot, and my eyes were searching for my friend Muhammad. And when I spotted him running towards me, shrapnel cut through his body. Something ushered me up on my feet, and I grabbed my friend Muhammad and I threw him over my shoulder, and I started running to the Syrian border in hopes of preserving myself from the Israeli fire. In all the chaos, I couldn't find where the tunnel was. And so as I ran where the Syrian army was, the rockets stopped, but the Israeli bullets continued, like snipers from behind me. I heard something like little rocks hitting Muhammad. I crossed over the border and I laid him on the ground. My friend had become my shield. I started screaming, "I promised your mother I'd bring you home alive!" But instead, Muhammad died that day. I came to know what death is in a different way. A special guest that I will never forget came to visit us in the PLO camp. It was my proudest day. I got called to a mandatory meeting. I went and I was ushered up to this special guest. He was Yasser Arafat. They put me right on stage with him. He was wearing his kia, a traditional Arab headdress, and a symbol of Palestinian nationality. I felt like I was seeing the Prophet Muhammad. He started speaking and hailing the movement. "Children like you," he said, and he pointed at me and the other kids, "will change the future. You are the future." He stepped forward and continued to say, People like Kamal will liberate Jerusalem for us one day. And then he grabbed me and I almost had a heart attack. I was being touched by the great Arafat. He grabbed my head and he kissed me on my forehead and he put me next to him as he spoke. Go with me, he said, as he put a white scarf and a red beret on me. That was just the beginning. From that time on, I traveled the world on one mission after another, whether it was to surprise Jews and kill them on the streets or to kill Russians in Afghanistan. In Saudi, one of my favorite things was to watch the beheadings on Friday afternoons of the infidels, those who wanted to leave Islam for another religion, or those who were gay or lesbian. I had tasted blood and I had seen death. I was on one bloody mission after another. This was my resume. In my heart, I was lifting up the banner of Islam and changing things in the world for Allah. I felt powerful because I had been chosen. I admired men like Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. I thought to myself, maybe I can be that man who will change the world. I can conquer Jerusalem. I can open her for my people. Jerusalem is our land, after all. Libya belonged to Muammar Gaddafi. Iraq belonged to Saddam Hussein. Syria belonged to Hafez al-Assad, and they were all trying to conquer Jerusalem. Maybe I can be the one to do it, he thought. There are two kinds of Muslims. Of the 1.5 billion total Muslims, 18% are Islamists who want to kill. Not all Muslims want to kill, of course. The radicals, however, believe that the moderate Muslims must be killed or become like them and live by the Quran and the Hadith, which is a record of everything that Muhammad did and taught. The radicals have this code that they live to liberate the world from the Jews. We were taught, he writes, that the Quran says that no one will be left except the Muslims. The Jews and the Christians will be no more. We were taught that God so hated the Jews that he caused them to be monkeys. Cleansing the earth from Jewish blood was the goal. As for the land of great Israel, it's Muslims against the Jews. We write on walls in the Middle East, the people of Saturday, those who hold the Sabbath on Saturday, first, and the Sunday people next. First, we will annihilate the Jews, then the Christians. This was the mindset I had as a radical Muslim jihadist. In classes, we were taught both the philosophical and the military aspects of Islam. One class was the propaganda class entitled, How Do You Turn Everything Against Your Enemy? Can you believe that? In Lebanon, we shot our weapons from hospitals, from United Nations locations, and from schools, so that when the Israelis hit back at where the rockets came from, innocent people died. We were even using children and women as shields. It was a tactic so that we could spread propaganda about the Jews killing innocent people, women and children. This way we could say, well, look who the Jews are killing. The political party Hamas would do this too, to garner sympathy from the world for the Palestinians and to create propaganda against the Jews. My heart's greatest desire was to see the giant infidel dead. The great giant is America. I came to the United States for the purpose of cultural jihad, determined it would change America the way it was changing Great Britain and Europe. I worked with the Muslim Student Association, the Young Muslim Association, and the Muslim Brotherhood. There are many groups with the goal of cultural jihad in the United States, and we were working to unify them. Our first target was the ethnic groups, like the African Americans and the Hispanics in the prison system. We would tell them, the white system put you behind bars and forgot about you. Islam came to free the black people from American slavery. We are here to give you freedom. Another tactic was to knock on the doors of lower income families and the poor people. We would ask them, what do you need today? Or are you hungry? Then we would buy groceries and cook for them, and over time we would befriend them and ask them to join our cause. We would tell them there's no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his final prophet and messenger. Once we earned their trust, we would then begin to indoctrinate them with the ideologies of Islam. Then we would meet their families and help them find jobs and meet their needs, and so on. Unlike 9/11, cultural jihad is about becoming like the enemy in order to conquer the enemy from within. You have to learn the language and the culture. You have to learn to eat, speak, and blend into society. Another focus for me was to take Christians and Jews and convert them to Islam. These in return would become Muslims who would bring others to Islam and help pave the way for America to be vulnerable to Islam from within and without. I got a job and I proceeded to be a nice guy. I would help meet people's needs, be a friend to them, all to win their trust in me so I could then bring them to Islam. I used to go to high schools, to colleges, and to the prison system. I would tell people in the prisons, Allah wants to take care of you. When you go to people who are outcasts of society and you tell them Allah sent you to help them, you don't have to sell it. They're ready for help and for Islam. In order to conquer the world, we were also taught to work in the Western world specifically through the women. Women would be easier to convert to Islam. The American women are easy, we were told. Tell them you love them, and before you know it, they'll fall for you. The strategy was to marry them and acquire a green card and citizenship. The next step was to spread Islam to her family and friends. Now we could change the culture from within the family with a goal to subdue the world and bring it into submission to Allah. One day, something happened that changed my life completely. Just when I thought everything was moving in the right direction, I was driving down a street when a truck came from opposite lane and hit me head on. The impact was so severe that I ejected out of my seat and out of the car. Parts of the car landed on my neck so that I couldn't move my body. I was severely injured. I was taken to a hospital. And as I lay in the hospital, I had only confusion. Why had this happened? I thought maybe Allah was angry with me. 2 doctors and another man became very close to me during my time in the hospital, the orthopedic surgeon, the physical therapy doctor, and a good Samaritan. Since I had no family in America, one of the doctors and his wife befriended me and took me to their home to recuperate. I stayed there the entire time it took me to recover. The family took me in as if I were part of their own family. Their children treated me with love and something I had never known before. At 7 years old in my life, I had been a jihad warrior, but now these kids were speaking to me without any violence in their thoughts. They were touching me, loving me, and praying Jesus prayers in their little voices for me to recover and be healed. This kind of relationship with their God was so new to me. Allah was not a God of relationship as far as I knew. All of a sudden, I wanted a relationship with him. But in Islam, you don't have a relationship with Allah. He's up there and you're down here. You are a servant and he is a distant God. But I decided I would seek Allah and see what he had to say. One day, I fell on my knees in front of a window and I put my hands up to heaven and I cried out to him, Allah, Allah, my Lord and my King, why did you allow this to happen to me? Allah, why did you put me among these people? I'm confused. They are stupid. They don't know who we are or what our capability is. Allah, why did you do this to me? Allah, I'll kill more people for you. I'll make more Muslims for you. I'll change the world for you. I want to have a relationship with you. If you're real, speak to me. Let me know that you are real. And I waited. Guess what? Allah said absolutely nothing. While I waited, this family flashed before me and became like a living book in front of me. I started to see how they lived their lives. They had a relationship with their God and with one another as husband and wife. They were Americans and Christians, but they were not bad people, as I had always believed. They took care of me and revived me and loved me unconditionally and prayed for me. They were generous and tender to their children, and they lived by a different code called love that I didn't know existed. I certainly didn't know how to love. We sought to love our enemies by causing them to vanish through terrorism. These people lived by their Bible that says to love your enemy and to take care of the people who are homeless or in need. I was both, homeless without any family to care for me and greatly in need, and they were reaching out to me. What's more, they paid my hospital debts. Their children just loved me. They called me Uncle Kamal. These people even trusted me to babysit their children. They had no idea that their deadly enemy was in their midst. I thought, I could finish this whole family off in one moment. They're like sheep to the slaughter. Yet I also realized, but they're not what I've been taught. I thought I can't live anymore because everything I lived and worked for is not real. It's false. And when I needed Allah the most, he didn't come to me. At this point, I was desperate for answers, and I was worried Allah might kill me for questioning him. Islam teaches that if you challenge Allah, he will kill you, and I had challenged him. I thought, Allah, if I die today because I kill myself and go to hell, I will be glad to go to hell because I called you and I asked you and I knocked on your door and you did not do anything. I was sure the sword of Allah would just come right then and just take off my head. I wanted to cluck out that day to put an end to my life. I thought, this is the final place for me. I was reaching for one of my guns that I still had with me to blow my head off. At that moment, suddenly, for the first time in my life, I had a miracle. I heard a voice that had to be God's. It was so real. The voice was kind and gentle and meek, like a father's voice, like he knew me as a child, even before I was ever born. He called me by my name and he said, Kamal, the Muslims believe in the God of Father Abraham. The Jews and the Christians believe in the God of Father Abraham. They all pray to him. Why don't you call on the God of Father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? If the voice hadn't mentioned Muslims, I would have thought it was a demon speaking to me. I fell on my knees with my hands reaching again up to heaven, and very swiftly I cried with all my might, God of Father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if you are real, will you speak to me? God of Father Abraham, if you are real, I want to know you. And that's all I had to pray. The God of Abraham came to me. The God of heaven and earth came right there into the room, and that room was just filled with his tangible glory and power. In his presence, I felt that fullness of joy and power and healing and love and peace and assurance and reverence. It was Jesus, and he just stood there. And I said, who are you, my Lord? He said, I am that I am. What is that supposed to mean? He answered, I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, and I'm everything in between. I knew you, Kamal, before I formed the foundation of the earth. I have loved you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Now rise up, Kamal. You are my warrior. You're not their warrior. As I rose up, my body was impacted from top to bottom. My head, my neck, my collarbone, my ribs, my knees, everything became perfect. He totally healed me in one moment. Only the God of the Bible did miracles. He did not do miracles in any other religion, surely not in Islam. At that moment, I knew his name was Yahweh, and his name was Jesus. And I understood that God is one. I said to him, I will live and die for you, my Lord. But he said, do not die for me. I died for you, that you may live. And I said to him, I'll go and grab by the eyelashes and the skin of their teeth and make everybody Christians. His response was, the harvest is plentiful. The workers are few. Be an ambassador of mine. I started jumping up and down and I was shouting, I am the ambassador of God. Only to realize later there are millions of ambassadors. The creation, me, came to know the Creator for the first time in his life that day. And the creation surrendered. Someone I didn't even know made me. I knew who my mother and father were, but it's God who created me. It is he who has marked my life and the life of every believer in Jesus. I have a different mission today, to love my enemy. You can learn more about Kamal's ministry now at his website, Koome, K-O-O-M-E, ministries.com. He goes on to write, today my heart's desires changed. I no longer desire to hate my enemies or kill them. Now I share his life to those I thought were my enemies and the people I desired to kill, the Jews and the Christians. Today I stand on their wall, guarding and watching over them. The Bible says that he whom the Son sets free is free indeed. See John 8:36. My journey from jihad to freedom and liberty took place in Christ Jesus. If I did not meet Christ that day, I would never have had a story of victory to tell you. One God, Allah, sought my blood. The true God gave his blood for me. Islam called me to be his slave, and God called me to be his son. One arrested my life, one set me free. One blinded my eyes, one opened my eyes. If I have anything to say to my fellow listeners, it is that today can be a beginning for you. Won't you call on Jesus today, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the great I am? It may be hard for you to imagine how a jihadist Muslim warrior since the age of 7 who traveled the world killing Jews and Christians can be a recipient of such mercy and love by calling upon the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let me invite you to call out to the God of our father Abraham right now. Oh God of Abraham, pray, I want to know you and know the truth about who you are. I desire to know your love and mercy.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way.
Would you reveal to me who you are and how I can follow you with all my heart? I want to know the great I am and the God of my father Abraham. Thank you for opening my heart and revealing the truth to me about Jesus. Amen. Let me pray for you as well. Father, I ask you to reveal Jesus, the great I am, to this person watching and bring him or her into a revelation of your love and forgiveness and truth. Lead his or her life into your path and let him or her know your presence and glory in Jesus' name. Until next time, bye-bye for now.